June 22, 1943. The sun, a brutal, unforgiving orb, beat down on the dusty airfield near Kharkov. Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Lange, a veteran of the Eastern Front, squinted against the glare, the heat shimmering off the tarmac distorting the air above his Focke-Wulf Fw 90A4. He called it the Black Devil, a nickname earned from the Soviets who cursed its brutal efficiency. Unlike the elegant, almost fragile Messerschmitt Bf-199, the F-199 was a brute, rugged, heavily armed, and built to take a beating. It was a fighter designed for the meat grinder of the Eastern Front, and Lange, with his 80 kills, was its perfect pilot. He ran a gloved hand over the cowling of the BMW 801 radial engine, its massive fan blades a silent promise of power. The ground crew, their faces streaked with grease and sweat, were making their final checks. The Fw 190 was a mechanic's dream compared to the temperamental 199, easy to maintain, quick to rearm, and forgiving in a dive. But today, the air was heavy with a different kind of tension. Rumors of a massive Soviet offensive, a summer storm of steel and fire, had been swirling for weeks. Kursk, the name was whispered with a mixture of dread and anticipation. This was where the fate of the Eastern Front would be decided, and Lange knew his Black Devil would be in the thick of it. His squadron commander, Hauptmann Richter, clapped him on the shoulder. "Another day, Karl-Heinz. The Evens are getting bolder. Keep your head on a swivel." Lange nodded, his eyes scanning the vast, endless sky. The Eastern Front was a different beast than the West. No gentlemen's duels here. Just brutal close-quarters fighting, often against overwhelming numbers. The Soviets flew their Yaks and Lodkins Colts with a desperate ferocity, and their ground attack Il-2 Sturmoviks, the flying tanks, were a constant, infuriating threat to the panzer divisions below. He climbed into the cockpit, the familiar scent of aviation fuel and leather filling his nostrils. The canopy, a thick, armored bubble, closed with a satisfying thud, sealing him into his world of steel and instruments. He went through his pre-flight checks, each movement precise, automatic. Switches flicked, gauges danced, the radio crackled with static. He felt the raw power of the BMW 801 stirring to life, a deep guttural rumble that vibrated through the airframe. The Fw 190 shuddered, eager to fly. He taxied to the runway, the tailwheel castoring obediently, the roar of his engine joining the symphony of other Fw 190s taking off. Takeoff was always a rush. The powerful torque of the radial engine tried to pull the nose to the left, but Lange corrected it with practiced ease. The Fw 190 accelerated down the dusty strip, gathering speed, the tail lifting, then the main wheels. He was airborne, climbing steeply, the vast green expanse of the Russian steppe unfolding beneath him. He joined his staffel, a tight formation of 6 Fw 190s, climbing towards the sun. Their mission, a fighter sweep ahead of the advancing panzer spearheads, clearing the skies of any Soviet opposition. At 5,000 meters, the air was crisp and clear. He scanned the sky, his eyes constantly moving, searching for the telltale glint of enemy aircraft. The radio was mostly silent, just the occasional chatter from ground control. Then, a sudden burst of static. "Bandits, high!" 11 o'clock. Richter's voice, sharp and urgent. Lange's heart rate quickened, a familiar surge of adrenaline. He spotted them, a swarm of Soviet Yaks, tiny specks against the vast blue, heading straight for them. They were outnumbered as usual, but the Fw 190 was a superior machine, and Lange was a master of its capabilities. "Form up, attack formation," Richter ordered. The Fw 190s tightened their ranks, a deadly arrowhead. Lange pushed the throttle forward, the BMW 801 responding instantly, surging with power. He felt the G-forces press him back into his seat as he maneuvered for position. The Yaks, agile but less robust, were closing fast. He picked his target, a lone Yak 9, its green camouflage stark against the sky. He dove, the Fw 190 a plummeting falcon, its speed building rapidly. The air screamed past his canopy. He lined up the shot, his thumb hovering over the firing button. The Yak 9 filled his gun sight, its pilot, a tiny figure, visible in the cockpit. He squeezed the trigger. The Fw 199 shuddered as its 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns unleashed a torrent of fire. Tracers, like fiery pearls, arced towards the Soviet fighter. The Yak-9 exploded in a ball of flame and smoke, disintegrating in midair. Lange pulled up sharply, avoiding the debris, his eyes already searching for the next target. One down. The dogfight was a chaotic ballet of death. 419Ts and Yaks wheeled and turned, tracers crisscrossing the sky. Lange was in his element, his 4190 responding to his every command. He executed a perfect moment turn, coming up behind another Yak-9. A short burst, and it too went down, trailing black smoke. He felt a grim satisfaction. This was what he was built for. This was what the Black Devil was built for. But the Soviets kept coming. More Yaks, more Lodjigs. They were like a relentless tide. He saw one of his Staffa-mates, Lieutenant Schmidt, get hit, his 4190 spiraling downwards, a plume of smoke marking its descent. Lange felt a pang of anger, a cold fury. He pushed harder, flying with a desperate, almost reckless abandon. He was a blur of motion, weaving through the chaos, his cannons spitting fire. He spotted a formation of Il-2 Sturmoviks, the dreaded flying tanks, heading towards the German lines. These were the priority targets, heavily armored ground attack aircraft that could wreak havoc on the panzer divisions. He broke off from the dogfight, diving towards the Sturmoviks, his speed building to terrifying levels. The Il-2s were flying in a tight formation, their rear gunners scanning the skies. He knew their weakness, a blind spot directly below and behind. He came in low, hugging the terrain, then pulled up sharply, positioning himself directly beneath the last Il-2. He opened fire, aiming for the unarmored oil cooler. The 4190 bucked and shuddered as its cannons roared. The Il-2's engine coughed, then burst into flames. It peeled off from the formation, a crippled bird heading for the ground. Lange pulled away, feeling the heat of the explosion on his tail. 2 more kills. But the fight was far from over. He rejoined the dogfight, the sky still swarming with Soviet fighters. His fuel gauge was dropping, his ammunition count dwindling. He knew he couldn't stay much longer. He spotted Richter, his 4190, engaged in a desperate turning fight with 3 Yaks. Plank dove to assist, a screaming blur of steel and fire. He opened fire on one of the Yaks, forcing it to break off. Richter, seeing his chance, put a burst into another. The 3rd Yak, outnumbered, disengaged, and fled. "Thanks, Karl-Heinz." Richter's voice crackled over the radio, a hint of exhaustion in his tone. "Time to go home. We've done enough for today." Lange nodded, though no one could see it. He turned his 4190 towards the west, towards their airfield. The sky was still dotted with distant dogfights, but their part in this battle was over. He flew low, skimming the treetops, the vast, scarred landscape of the Eastern Front passing beneath him. Burnt-out villages, shell craters, the endless, silent testimony to the brutality of the war. He landed smoothly, the Fw-190 bouncing once, twice, then settling onto the dusty runway. The ground crew rushed forward, eager to inspect the Black Devil for damage. He climbed out of the cockpit, his body aching, his ears ringing from the roar of the engine and the thunder of his cannons. He pulled off his helmet, running a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, a stark contrast to the grim realities of the day. Richter met him on the tarmac, a weary smile on his face. 3 more, Karl-Heinz. "Good work." Lange just nodded, too tired to speak. He looked back at his 4190, the Black Devil, its camouflage chipped and scarred, but still ready for another fight. It was a brutal machine for a brutal war, and he was its master. He knew tomorrow would bring more battles, more death, but for tonight he had survived. He had flown, he had fought, and he had returned. And that, on the Eastern Front, was victory enough. The war raged on, a relentless, consuming fire, and he, Karl-Heinz Lange, and his Black Devil were but tiny sparks in its inferno, fighting for survival in a sky that demanded everything. The endless steppe stretched out, indifferent to the human struggle, waiting for the next dawn, and the next wave of steel birds to fill its vast expanse with the roar of engines and the thunder of cannons. He was a hunter, a survivor, a ghost in the sky, and he would continue to fly until the very end, a testament to the brutal efficiency of the 4190 and the grim determination of its pilots. The Eastern Front was a place where only the strongest and the most ruthless could hope to endure, and Lange, with his Black Devil, was one of them. He was a legend in the making, a silent, deadly force in the vast, unforgiving skies above Russia, forever etched into the grim tapestry of the war. His story was one of survival, of skill, and of the relentless, brutal dance between hunter and hunted, played out day after day, high above the ravaged lands of the Eastern Front. And as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting long, dark shadows across the airfield, he knew that tomorrow the Black Devil would fly again.